terms of trends. Right now, I want to go north. Let's bring in some more of our live crew. Mike Seidel is in Port Lavaca, Texas, which is probably, in terms of a drive, about an hour to my north. So, Mike, what are you seeing up in Port Lavaca as things continue to increase in intensity?
We are seeing the ramp up of the wind, certainly, and also the water out here. We've got about an 8-foot seawall. And if you were watching earlier today, you know that the water was nowhere near the top. Now it's over the top of the seawall, protecting the hotel here. And then the front lawn is now overrun by the sea. I say that loosely because this is Lavaca Bay. Here comes another wave. And notice the bricks that were around this palm tree have been picked up and scattered in a little debris out here. Everything else is hunkered down. This hotel was built 6 years ago, and it's built of concrete and steel and hardy plank and block, and it's going nowhere. Nothing that really can get ripped off the side of the building. If you look up here, this is a very sturdy building, and we're about 15 to 16, maybe 17 feet above the ground level. So we're in great shape as far as any water rise, which is going to continue to come up. That's the 35 bridge. We saw one vehicle just recently. Wow, you can see out there, that's Lavaca Bay, and you can't see beyond that because of the visibility due to the rainfall, but Matagorda Bay goes right into the Gulf. That's Port O'Connor. That town's is going to get it from all sides, much like Port Aransas. So San Patricio, Aransas County, the Calhoun County area, out towards Port O'Connor, and Refugio County, that's in a little bit inland. Those are the main counties now, certainly in the path of the eye wall. Whether we get the eastern edge of the eye wall later on this evening remains to be seen, but we are going to get stronger winds than we've had, being clocked here at around 50 miles an hour in some of these squalls, Jim. So the water continues to rise as expected. We'll see how much of a water rise we have here. We're expecting 6 to 9 feet here on Lavaca Bay. By the way, the town under a curfew that came up at noon today. Mandatory evacuation kicked in yesterday. Not many folks in town. I did see some emergency vehicles across the street over at Lighthouse Beach. That's where we were yesterday when the first couple of lone squalls came in, right over there. But the water now is not up over the beach into the parking lot. But we've got a long way to go, and this is a slow-moving storm. We noted that the forward direction now has slowed from 10 miles an hour down to 8 miles an hour, and the rain continues to pelt us. I'll add up the rainfall total, Jim, in a minute, see how much we've had so far today. We're well over an inch, but we're only in the early stages of Harvey's rainfall. And as you know, Jim, the storm is going to slow down and just park and fester, meander for days to come. Jim, back to you in Corpus.
Mike, I wanted to ask you something. We did not have mandatory evacuations here. You did. And the end of the day, it doesn't mean anything because it can't make you leave, okay? But the bottom line is it does kind of give you a sense of urgency to the fact that if you don't leave, you could die. So some of our discussions this morning on the Weather Channel, we were talking to some of these mayors, and they were saying, you know, hey, we're a little concerned because we've only had about 60 to 70% of the people leave. Where you are, give us the outline of the mandatory evac that's been ordered up that way, and how many people that if you know, or the percentage, have actually heeded that evacuation.
I don't have numbers, but we drove through town last night, and a lot of folks had boarded up. Many people had left town. I would say it's got to be upwards of 80 to 90% or more have left town here. Now, remember, the difference between Port Lavaca and Corpus, the population here is about 12,500. In Corpus, we're talking a metro area of about 250,000. So the evacuation here it doesn't take nearly as much time. Granted, there are only 2 roads out, 2 lanes here, and then 87 up to Victoria. But we did talk to a lot of folks yesterday at lunchtime when they issued the evacuation, Jim, and I heard guys that have been living here for a while saying, thank goodness, that's a great thing to do. Let's get the people out of harm's way. You have to remember, the last time they evacuated Port Lavaca and this county, Calhoun County, was for Ike. But Ike jogged north, so they didn't get much of an impact from Ike here. They were on the offshore side. So you really have to go back to Celia in 1970, and the bellwether is Carla in 1961, which was the last Cat 4 hurricane to make landfall in Texas. Whoa, there's a good gust, Jim. We're up elevated a little bit above the water. I think you're down near the water, but what we're not getting yet are those bands from the eye wall, some of the outer bands, and those bands certainly will really rock us here later on this evening and overnight here in Port Lavaca. And I'm afraid that places like Aransas Pass, Rockport, Port O'Connor are going to be devastated by this hurricane.
No question about it. Mike, when we come back after break, I want to talk to you a little bit about, show us around, show us how high you expect the water to get, and you know, essentially what that's going to look like for you when you're in the heat of battle here tonight, probably over the next couple of hours. Guys, oh, we have 2.5. I'm sorry, I thought you said 30 seconds. So let's do that now, Mike Seidel. There was a little bit of light left, Mike. Show me how, you know, what's the surge expected and how high you expect that, because when the Hurricane Center does this, what they're giving us is total water rise. All right, so that's as high as this water going to get. We know that there's 6 to 12 feet is what we're expecting in through here. But Mike, what are you expecting to see where you are? Holy smoke.
Well, we expect at least 6 or 7 feet here in Lavaca Bay. Again, we're 30 miles inland, but the water's going to be pushed up Matagorda Bay into Lavaca Bay. We've probably come up a couple of feet. It's hard to tell because you've got the waves superimposed on top of the water level, and they're crashing here. And remember, the wind is from the northeast, so it doesn't have a very long fetch here. You can barely make out the other side. That's Port Comfort and the refinery over there. That's, a couple of miles or so. So you don't have a long fetch for the wave energy, the wind to pile up the water and build these waves. It's a whole different story out on the Gulf Coast where you have open water for miles and miles, and the buoys, they were reporting waves this afternoon over 20, 25 feet. Here we won't have the wave action, but we will still have the water rise, Jim. And again, this hotel is in great shape because we are safely above any projected forecast water rise and surge here in Port Lavaca. Again, where I'm standing about 15 to 16 feet above where the water is now, and we're very confident that the water is not going to get that high here with Hurricane Harvey. Jim, back to you in Corpus.
Well, good news, Mike. That's exactly what I expected to hear from you, buddy. Again, guys, just so you know, a little behind the scenes, when we come out to a location as well. Let's go up about an hour to my north to Port Lavaca. Seidel, you're a genius when it comes to maps. I'm trying to imagine the coast of Texas right now, and there's a lot of barrier islands that protect this place. But there's one area, I can't remember if it's Port O'Connor or Freeport, that doesn't they're right on the water. Which town is that? Do you remember?
Jim, I have to apologize. As soon as I heard the word genius, I couldn't hear anything else, but I'll thank you. I heard about Port O'Connor. Okay. Yeah, Port O'Connor is right out there. It's about 25 miles away, and you can see what we're dealing with now, a bit of a squall coming through. These winds have been gusting 40 to 50 miles an hour. Look at the water coming up here on the seawall and coming into the front yard of the Holiday Inn. We'll swing around. You can see some of the stones that have been picked up by the water and tossed inward. You can see the wind across the parking lot here. So now we're getting wind without any protection coming right into me. And you can see you have to hold your ground. And again, we're not even getting anything close to what they're seeing in Port Aransas. This has got to be pushing 50 miles an hour right now. Pretty good sustained wind here, blowing me around. The power is still on. We expect the power will go out at some point. We hope it doesn't, but the locals pretty confident at some point later tonight the power will go out, but right now we're holding on to the juice. And look at the water. Earlier today, this was all sea oats. So this water has definitely come up a couple of feet, and it will continue to come up as the eye of Harvey comes on shore and goes probably just off to our west, making a line towards the Victoria area after midnight tonight. But in the meantime, we're just inland from Port O'Connor, and we're north and east to Port Aransas. So Jim, just a wild scene out here, and this is just the leading edge of what's going to be a long, raucous night and weekend here on the coast of Texas. Jim, back to you in Corpus.
In that direction, along with Port Lavaca, as I said, and Mike Seidel is there. Mike.
Hey, Brian, we're here in Port Lavaca. You mentioned us trying to figure out where the eye wall is going to go. We're going to get clipped maybe on the northeast side. That wouldn't surprise me. That's where you have the strongest winds, and the heaviest rainfall. And I just noted that Victoria, which is about 30 miles north of here, inland in Victoria County, where they also have a mandatory evacuation, I believe the only inland county that went with a mandatory, they just gusted to 49 miles an hour. So it goes to show you what kind of night is ahead for Victoria, a city that is much larger than here in Port Lavaca. Now look at the water rise here on the wall, and we've seen changes just in the past half an hour, picking up these bricks that were surrounding this landscaping around the palm tree, and this water comes up and it goes into that drainage. Now that drainage is for rainfall, and then it just goes, it tries to go back out into the Lavaca Bay. So a nasty, angry Lavaca Bay. Again, reminding you, we're about 25 or so miles as the crow flies from the open waters of the Gulf of Mexico. No doubt the wave action out there is much higher, because we're only getting a wind fetch across here. Now look how dark it is in the distance. Now we are losing light out here, but it is getting darker. We've got another band coming our way, but the real intense bands are still on the horizon. We've still got a little bit of time before we get really hammered, like they're getting down on the coast of Aransas County, Port Aransas, up to Rockport, Aransas, past those areas. I was there in June for my niece's wedding. It's so beautiful, that beach. You can drive out to it, and you can play ball on the beach. You can cook out. A lot of beaches these days, you really can't do much except sit there and watch the water. There's so many rules, but Aransas Beach, Aransas Pass Beach is just so nice. It'll be interesting to see how all those condos, all the condominiums that have been built up in recent years, a lot of that construction is new there, how that fares, and I guess we'll find out in the days to come. But it won't be one of these deals where the hurricane comes in and comes out, Brian, and we can get back in there tomorrow with the sun coming out, because often the day after the sun comes out, and we can really take a look at what impacts we have. Boy, isn't it getting dark out here right now? We've got this next squall. I can see the rain lowering the visibility in the distance on the Texas 35 bridge. So Brian, we'll throw it back to you. You can update us on the radar and show what is rolling our way around the northeast side, the north side of Hurricane Harvey.
Yes, Mike, that you see is not the eye wall. It is the band outside the eye wall, though. And it's the band that here we're looking at the radar. Let me show you where Mike is. Mike's right up here in Port Lavaca. It's this band that he's seeing here. So the eye wall is down here where the strongest winds are. So first thing that's going to happen in the next probably half hour or something like that, that as the hurricane goes to the northwest or the northwest, that these bands are going to move in the same direction. So it's not that far away. Maybe about as far as you are from Port O'Connor, Mike, is how far that that band is from you that's coming in. And obviously it's got stronger winds than you have now, and then you have the eye wall to come, where the maximum winds are in this northern part of the eye wall, based on what we can see here. The other thing that is very, very important, and it's really critical that Mike is on high ground there, because with the circulation coming like this, that's pushing that Gulf water. And look what it's doing here. It's pushing the Gulf water into Matagorda Bay here, and that's pushing it up into Lavaca Bay. So that is going to increase. So far, it's been kind of oblique the way the wind has come. But when the center gets up in here and the circulation is like this, it's going to push the water directly up toward Port Lavaca. And that's why the National Hurricane Center has put up the storm surge information showing very high water. Look at the reds up in here. The reds are 9 to 12 feet above dry land. Now, good thing is Port Lavaca is where the blues are there, because it is high. They actually moved the city there from Indianola, which is down toward Port O'Connor. They moved it because it was flooded twice and destroyed in Indianola, and they moved it to Port Lavaca, which is on high ground. All right, Mike, I can see you feeling the wind there. Do you have a sense that the water is coming up yet, Mike, or a sense of the way the tide is flowing? Is it flowing from the south yet?
Yeah, the water's slowly coming up. One thing we don't have here, Brian, as you probably well know, there's not much of a tidal range. High tide and low tide, you're talking about a 6 to 8 inch range, versus the East Coast, where it's always problematic timing the landfall. And the strongest onshore winds will be low tide, high tide, or somewhere in between. I know it's all factored into the water rise from the National Weather Service, the Hurricane Center, but that's one one part of the equation we don't have to worry about here because there's really no tidal range. With that said, the water is coming right up on the wall here. We're watching the rain coming across Lavaca Bay, and this town is a ghost town. Power is still on. Our winds have gusted to about 50 miles an hour here in Port Aransas. I mentioned earlier, Victoria Inland has already gusted to 49. Reynolds Wolf will be live from the Victoria area. He'll take us all night long on the Weather Channel, and he may take, if not the eye wall, the eye itself, early on Saturday morning. We'll have continuing coverage. We'll go back to Jim Cantori in the thick of it at Corpus Christi on the Weather Channel. Harvey battering the Texas coast tonight and through the weekend.
Let's go back to Mike, who's in Port Lavaca right now, to talk a little bit about what he's seeing. And Mike, it's so important, certainly to be in a place where you've got at least a barrier island to take down some of those waves. We saw some of the waves offshore today, 25, 30 feet. It would be an absolute disaster if those made it to the coastline.
Indeed, that's much like we saw with Katrina in Mississippi. We were down in Long Beach the next day, and the entire coastline there. You were just down the coast in the Biloxi Gulfport area before that, and the whole coastline was just wiped, leveled about a quarter mile in. I want to show you real quickly. We're going to have to turn the camera back around to keep the rainwater off it. This is the Holiday Inn Express and Suites pool. So it's now, the water has come up over pool level. So we have definite rise, and if you were with us just an hour ago, you know this front yard was mostly visible. Now the water has risen. Here comes the water from Lavaca Bay, and as Jim mentioned, we're not going to get the big waves here. One of the reasons is we're about 25 miles inland. We've got some protection from that kind of wave action because the fetch here is only across Lavaca Bay, which is just several miles. That's over the 35 bridge towards the refinery in Port Comfort. So we don't have that long fetch. That wind blows over the water for a long duration, and that wind energy transfers to the surface and creates the wave action. So the wave action here will be stunted compared to what they're seeing out on the barrier islands, but still the water will be rising. We're going to follow this through this evening and overnight. And the interesting thing will be to see how long the water stays up tomorrow and this weekend, because Hurricane Harvey is not going anywhere. It's starting to slow down already at 8 miles an hour. We expect it'll throw on its brakes as we get into tomorrow and Sunday, and that's going to mean tremendous amounts, catastrophic impacts with inland flooding. Jim, back to you in Corpus Christi.